Hello and welcome to Altitude from Europe's biggest drone exhibition, DroneX. We'll be talking to some of the key players from the future flight industry. Before we do so, let's take a look around. I'm joined by Callum Holland from the Civil Aviation Authority. Hi Callum. Before we get started on the regulations, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, I'm Callum. I'm the transformation lead within the Civil Aviation Authority. I've been at the CAA for about 18 months now, thoroughly enjoying it. Prior to that, I worked with a French aerospace and defence organisation called Thales. I was head of flight operations there for the UAS operational authorisation in the UK. So very sort of operationally sort of focused from an RPAS context. And then prior to that, I actually ran a commercial drone company for a few years as well.
So experience that's really well suited to today's job.
Yeah, I'd like to think so.
In terms of what you do then today, can you tell us a little bit about the regulatory framework and how that's panning out?
Yeah, sure. So that's a really big question. I think if we keep it to specific category that I'm sure kind of our watchers here today are au fait with, we've developed this regulatory framework over years and years. It's not something that we sort of just developed a couple of years ago. It's something that's been naturally growing, and it's very sort of evolutionary, not revolutionary. Heavily tied to the European framework, given that when we left Europe those years ago, we transitioned the existing European legislative framework into the UK's model. We've grown it since then, and we've looked at it and reviewed it in a way to see how does that best fit sort of the UK idiosyncrasies. And focusing on the specific category, it's really about how we enable. So we have an oversight function. We have a significant function around safety and making sure that we can integrate into airspace and everybody is safe in doing so, both including other air users but also those on the ground. But we also have a growth duty. So we know there are so many incredible use cases and applications of these technologies. How do we build a regulatory framework in collaboration with the government, just understanding that government create primary and secondary legislation with kind of support and input from the CAA. The CAA developed the acceptable means of compliance and guidance material to that legislation. How do we do that in a way that meets all those principles I've just talked about, but at the same time enables the industry to grow? So our focus over the past, however many years has been about how do we enable industry to grow, how do we enable them to do it safely? And for the specific categories, a couple of really interesting things happening at the moment. I'm sure everybody's heard of the 4-pillar plan.
Tell us a little bit more about the 4-pillar plan.
Sure. So the 4-pillar plan is really our route to enable routine, scalable, beyond visual line of sight operations in the specific category. Understanding that there's 4 fundamental challenges we have, as an industry, have to overcome. So we understand there's responsibilities on industry, perhaps manufacturers, on operators, on governments, but also the regulators. So we've all got our sort of part to play. The 4-pillar plan, first of all, we've got another video on that, so we can Google 4-pillar CAA. I'm afraid that's another video with me in it, so if you, sorry about that. Google 4-pillar plan CAA, that will come up.
Thank you.
The first pillar is flight worthiness. So one of the challenges we have in the specific category is how do we allow an operator to demonstrate that their aircraft is sufficiently technically robust? So we know if we're going to see scaled beyond visual line of sight activity, that aircraft is going to have to overfly uninvolved third parties. And we need to protect those uninvolved third parties. The way we can do that is by allowing the operator to demonstrate that their platform is suitably technically robust. Unlike conventional aviation, where we have really robust procedures and processes to develop an aircraft which is very, very safe, we've been lacking in that space in the specific category. So it's about working with manufacturers, working with standards bodies, working with government, working with operators. And at the CAA, we're going to develop a framework called the Flight Worthiness Assessment Entity Scheme that's going to play our part in facilitating the operator to demonstrate that their platform is technically robust in order that we can begin to authorise those overflight activities beyond visual line of sight. The second pillar is risk assessment. So at the moment, risk assessment methodology is arguably somewhat subjective in the way it's assessed. It's no surprise that we're moving to SORA. We've been really clear on that. So one of our sort of ambitions as well is to move towards being able to recognise SORA-backed methodology. As part of that, we're digitising that process. So no more of these PDFs that we've had to sort of email and all the back and throw on sort of emails and attachments and all of that stuff. We've got a piece of work called the Disco project, and that's something else we can Google. I won't go into it now, we'll be here for some time. Where future applications will be rooted in SORA, which is a very objective risk assessment methodology. but they're also going to digitize it at the same time. So you're going to have that really nice sort of front end digital platform where you can submit your application through and view its progress as it sort of goes through the CAA. The other sort of the third challenge, the third sort of pillar is pilot competency. So again, unlike conventional aviation, where we've got really robust mechanisms to demonstrate the competence of the pilot, we don't have too many ways of formally recognising pilot competency in a specific category. We've got the general visual line of sight certificate, but we recognise we need to do something for beyond visual line of sight operations and more advanced operations in general. So as part of that, we're working with recognised assessment entities who already deliver pilot competency training to look at a syllabus that's more appropriate for beyond visual line of sight operations. The fourth pillar.
Number four,
we're nearly there. Airspace integration.
Okay.
So looking at the fundamental challenges of operating both segregated and non-segregated airspace, how do we support industry, manufacturers and standards body in developing the appropriate technologies that they can be reasonably assured will be recognised by the regulator once they've been developed? So looking at non-cooperative and cooperative-based detect and avoid. On the cooperative detect and avoid front, that we've had some recent announcements around our recognition of ADSB 978 UAT for our pass. That's really significant in the cooperative DAA front, but also looking at sort of operational procedures and technical standards for airspace integration as well. And that's kind of the fourth pillar there.
Perfect. Callum, that's fantastic. So a lot going on in the near-term future.
Yeah.
A really big question to round things out then. What does the future look like, the future of flight in terms of advanced air mobility?
Yeah, huge question. I'll pick probably the topic that perhaps I'm more personally sort of minded to, and that's autonomy and artificial intelligence. So at the moment, the aviation framework is very much based on highly automated, predeterministic systems. So a function of perhaps an autopilot that actually a human, if they were in receipt of that same data, would make the same judgment of what that aircraft might do. As we move towards a world of kind of autonomy, swarming operations and artificial intelligence more broadly, the regulator's got to ask itself, how do we assess autonomy? How do we assess artificial intelligence where they don't really align with traditional kind of assurance techniques for normal programming, highly automated, predeterministic? So I think for me, the exciting part for me personally is looking at how we assess and assure autonomy and AI into the future within aviation.
So lots of work right now and some big challenges for the future. Callum, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Some of the biggest companies in the world are now taking part in the drone industry, and I'm joined by Matt Satterley from Wing. Matt, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. I know that you've travelled over from the States, so possibly a bit jet-lagged.
Not feeling too bad today, but really excited to be here. We've been watching this conference for a couple of years now. Our interest in the UK has continued to increase, and we're really excited. This is the first year that Wing's here, and we've been very happy to be able to sponsor this and let everyone know our interest in joining the UK landscape.
And talking of interest in the UK landscape then, what do Wing do?
So Wing is a commercial drone delivery company. We have a lightweight UAS that delivers basic commodities, healthcare items to people within a matter of minutes. So we started in 2012 in the Google Moonshot factory, and we've been delivering now since 2017. We started in Australia. We've done over 350,000 commercial deliveries in that time. So we're really looking to understand how we can start to work in the UK landscape and understand how we can add value to people's everyday lives by drone.
That's a huge number of deliveries. What have been the key challenges in enabling that to happen?
Yeah, so I think, going out and doing it probably is first and foremost, right? But one of the things that we've been really focused on is how do we enter the communities responsibly? So in the markets where we've been, Australia, Finland, Ireland, America, and Switzerland, we go in early and often we engage with the community. We let them touch and feel the drone. We give them an understanding of what they can expect, because this is a new form of aviation, right? It's not tens of thousands of feet above people's head. It's over their neighborhoods, it's in their backyard, and so we want them to be able to understand the expectations they have from us as a responsible community member. And I think that's really started to open doors for people. It's allowed us to start scaling and allowed us to start experimenting with volumes of drone delivery instead of first in the world or one-off trials, and really developing a business. And so as we've developed this business globally, we think that there's real opportunities here in the UK as the regulatory environment starts to open up. for us to start experimenting with some really important use cases around healthcare delivery.
You talked there a little bit about the kind of regulatory environment. What are the key things that you need to happen to enable drone operations to occur in the UK for you?
Yeah, so I mean, regulation aviation is difficult, right? It's one of the most regulated industries in the world, and especially when you start talking about delivering healthcare and you start impacting people's daily lives the way that drones can. There's a lot of complicating factors there. I was telling somebody earlier today, when we first started doing drone delivery, everyone said, oh, I want sushi delivered to my house, so I want, golf balls delivered to my house, because these more complex use cases around healthcare delivery seemed way too far off. But over the years, we've started to engage with government, we've started working through some of these issues, we've demystified some of the challenges with drones, and we think there's a real opportunity now, hence why we're here at DroneX this year.
In terms of demystifying, we know that noise and privacy and security, they're often cited by the public in terms of concerns around drones. How have you tackled them in terms of where you're working currently?
Yeah, so I think that's part of the community engagement strategy I talked about earlier, is we give people an option to understand how the drone works and what it does sound like. One of the things we continue to make investments to improve our aircraft, as all companies in this space do, but we've moved our propeller shape, for instance, over the years to be able to change the pitch, and we've been able to sort of lower the appreciable noise that people are sensing from the drone. And getting that regular feedback from the community gives us a better understanding of what tweaks to make to the aircraft to make it more digestible in everyday life.
So really learning as you go.
Yeah, exactly.
If we look around us, there's an awful lot going on here. There's lots of operators, there's a regulator, and there's service providers all over the show. What have been some of your key takeaways from the show so far?
I think one of the things that's really interesting for us is the fact that we actually are peers with all of these companies here. I don't think this is a competitive landscape right now. We've joined arm in arm with other operators through forums like the BVLOS Operators Forum to be able to better understand how we can communicate with one another and how we can build off each other's success. And so there's standards development organizations, there's the BVLOS Operators Forum, there's chances for us to show that we can do this in concert rather than being cutthroat about it.
That's a great answer, and it was echoed by Callum Holland from the regulator, and he talked about community, he talked about exactly the same thing. If we cut to the absolute future then, what does the future look like in terms of advanced mobility from your perspective? How do you foresee it?
Yeah, so I think one of the approaches that the UK government's alluded to is building an integrated airspace, right? And so I don't think it's going to be too long in the future where you'll see a drone in the same ecosystem as a helicopter, and perhaps you're even going to see over the shoulder an aircraft on approach to the local airport. I think that's closer than most people expect, as long as we can focus on how do we make sure we're building a cooperative airspace system, how are we all talking to each other so that we can responsibly share the airspace.
So integration is really key.
Yeah, exactly. We're very excited about the opportunities that we have here in the UK to focus on some of those new forms of integration.
Fantastic. Matt, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
There's no doubt that drone deliveries play a really important part in the drone industry, and I'm joined by Michael Merritt from Skyports to tell us a little bit more. Michael, can you tell us a little bit more about what Skyports do?
Yeah, of course. So, Russell, we do drone deliveries, survey and surveillance for blue chip companies and governments around the world. So that could be anything from ship-to-shore deliveries out to vessels in the Singapore Bay, or it could be medical deliveries in rural Scotland.
And what is a ship-to-shore delivery? That sounds interesting.
So every day in Busan, in Yuzu, and in the port of Singapore, we have crews that deliver critical parts, cash, or other kind of urgent marine items out to those vessels. So they'll come into the anchorage and they'll moor up there and they'll call in a drone delivery instead of a diesel-powered launch boat.
So good for the environment?
Very good for the environment, and also a lot faster. So typically you'd have to wait maybe for the entire day to get your cash deliveries or your parts deliveries or your food delivery, but we can do that in an hour or less.
You also mentioned medical deliveries as well. What type of medical deliveries are we talking about there?
So typically in hard to reach areas, whether it be inter-island work or areas where road density is really low, we do hub and spoke networks for critical pathology samples. So if you can imagine you live on The example I always give is the Isle of Mull. The Isle of Mull is off the west coast, and getting your bloods done there, it has to go back on a ferry back to the main lab on the mainland. And that could take 2 days or so before your sample's actually finally tested. And we can bring that down from 2 days to 2 hours. And obviously, without having the network there permanently, it's really hard to tell exactly the detailed effect on patient care. But we know that taking it down from 2 days to 2 hours is going to have pretty great benefits.
Michael, you've outlined some really incredible use cases there, and they're all enabled by the drone, and we have one here in front of us. Can you tell us a little bit more about how this thing flies, how it works?
Yeah, of course. So this is the Swoop Aero Kite. It's a long-term partner of ours, an Australian manufacturer that builds this hybrid VTOL. And it's an all-electric drone that takes off like a helicopter, using its hoverprops, and then it transitions to forward flight using its pushers. And if you can imagine in a medical setting, this would take off from a key hub at a lab, for example, and it would fly out to those rural areas and pick up, roughly kind of a shoebox worth of blood or pathology samples. And what that looks like from an NHS perspective would be 30 to 40 vacutainers of blood, which in a small rural clinic might be enough to clear out the entire clinic for the day.
That's really incredible. So a big saving on traditional methods of moving bloods and test samples around there?
Yeah, so traditionally within the NHS, there's a milk round logistics run. And while that's really good for all of the other bulky items that need to move around the network, blood and pathology are critical items. And they normally have to go quite urgently. And that's where drones are really useful.
I mean, it sounds to me like this would be really well received by local communities. Has it been?
So the local communities that we've run our networks in have really loved the drone. We've even had the NHS telling us that some of our networks have caused increases in patients trying to get their pathology samples taken so that they can see them go on the drone.
Oh, wow.
I think for us, we operate in really rural areas. In those more urban areas, and as the industry scales, I'm sure we'll see a few more complaints around noise and other elements to do with public acceptance of drones as well.
And so typically when you're dealing with that public acceptance and dealing with the broader community, how do you tackle that? What's the kind of method that you follow?
So it's all about stakeholder engagement. So we run an extensive campaign of stakeholder engagement before any major program. So we'll go into the community and educate them on, what is a drone, how does it work, and really how does it actually benefit them? Because it doesn't really matter about how fancy our drone is or how great the technology is. It really matters what you're going to do for the people in that community. A good example is up in Orkney at the moment, we have a delivery network for Royal Mail, and we're delivering the mail every day to the people on Grahamsay and North Hoy. And we accelerate the mail by 24 hours, and on Fridays we deliver fish and chips. And it's that kind of little bit of extra work that makes a difference to the people in those areas.
Sure, I read about the fish and chip deliveries in the BBC article. Turning to this show, turning to DroneX, and there's an awful lot here, lots of operators, regulators here, there's loads of technology on display. What's been your kind of key takeaway from the show?
I think for me the key takeaway is the size of the show. If you'd come here a few years ago, we'd command a much smaller box within the Excel. It just shows me that we're at this inflection point in the drone industry, and we're very close to that point where regulations will allow scale in this industry. And you can see that this is an industry and a group of innovative people that are ready to take on that challenge and really unleash the benefits of not just one or two drones flying on one network, but a really scaled network where we can realize those benefits.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. I know that this particular stand's been really popular because you've got the Swoop Aero here, and so I shall let you continue your day. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Russell.
UK government play a key role in unlocking the drone industry in the UK, and I'm joined by Vicki Murdie from UKRI. Vicki, I understand you gave a keynote speech earlier today. How did it go?
It went really well. It's been a really nice buzz and atmosphere here this morning. It was my speech this morning was a bit of a whistle-stop tour around all things Future Flight Challenge, focusing heavily on drones as we're at DroneX today. So talking about our Phase 3 projects that we're funding, looking at the sort of technology aspects and integrating of systems, but also talking about skills, how we're supporting future generations and upskilling the current generations that we've got here. It was also a bit of a touch on some of our extracurricular activities, different industry working groups that we've created, and looking at how we work with government and regulator as well.
Okay, quite a few topics there then. So you mentioned Future Flight Challenge. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
So Future Flight Challenge is a UK government-funded challenge which has had £125 million of government funding, and that's matched by in excess of 175 million of industry funding. The idea is that it was to try and bring together members of the industry to work on collaborative projects. So they're all consortium projects. Some of them are small consortia of 2 or 3 companies, and some are much bigger with sort of 15 or so partners. But they bring together SMEs and larger companies and are really trying to drive forward the technological advances in the area, integrating systems together, but also looking at wider ecosystem questions. So for us, the focus isn't so much on the vehicle itself, but the societal benefits it can bring and all of the integration of technologies and integration into local communities that's needed to actually get to the point of delivering services that people want.
Okay. So in terms of those societal benefits, what are some of the key ones that we can expect to see from the future of flight?
So we really see that there's a massive opportunity to better connect people and services. So, for example, we've got Project Calus, which is looking at an NHS drone delivery network for Scotland. How do you do that across the entire of Scotland? And they have some really challenging geographies in island communities, etc. So that connection piece there. There's other projects that are looking at, well, how can you use drones within a region to do a number of different things? So down in Cornwall, an Open Skies Cornwall project. Then we have some that are looking at how do we support industry with enabling people to be taken out of hazardous working environments. So projects that are looking at how you do inspection using drones of national infrastructure, so power lines. So a project that's run by Seize AI is looking at how they can use drones beyond the visual line of sight for power line inspections, that sort of thing. So there's lots of different benefits we see in both industrial side for keeping people safe, connection side, and also just bringing people more different options for connecting through better mobility as well as delivery of services.
Thank you. We're here at DroneX, and obviously the focus is drones, but I'm really aware that advanced air mobility includes also the kind of eVTOL space and electric mobility. Does Future Flight Challenge, and how does Future Flight Challenge tackle that?
So we have projects across 3 different vehicle types. So there are obviously drones, as you say, that's the focus of today here. But we also have projects that are supporting eVTOLs, so the AAM industry. We have many different terms, don't we, across our industry. But also some that are looking at hydrogen or hybrid regional flight. So trying to support, can we actually develop a network in this country of greener flight for communities that currently have poor connectivity. So up in island communities in Scotland, is hydrogen flight in small aircraft, is that a possibility for them there? Can the economics and the environmental side be unlocked so that people can travel and be connected, but in a way that's sustainable for the planet?
And what would you say is the most exciting thing about the future of flight? How would you summarise that?
Oh, the sheer breadth, actually. I mean, the whole industry and what the industry is trying to do is really inspiring. Seeing people looking at technology, a lot of people come into this industry from other technical areas, and then they see the application of how to use those technologies that they're familiar with things like AI, things like autonomous systems. How can they use those to better serve people? But I love the breadth of what we do. It's really worth getting out of bed in the morning to come and work in an industry like this. And because we're looking at so much of the ecosystem around future of flight, not just the technologies themselves, there's so many different topics to get into. Literally every day we're learning new things, every day we're bringing new people together, and the conversations just keep growing. And we're getting to a point where it's starting to feel like industries getting to solve those problems and making significant steps forward towards realising full commercial and societal opportunities.
Fantastic. That passion that you talked about and the excitement around future flight has been a common theme actually today, and it's very inspiring to hear that. And obviously we're in this huge hall and there's an awful lot here. What's your kind of key takeaway from the event, from DroneX?
I think, so I've been here every year that it's been in existence in DroneX, and actually seeing the growth of it, seeing how there is a thriving industry and people are coming together to start to harmonise on solutions, seeing that maturity. I think that's what I'm really seeing compared to previous years, is that continual growth and continual maturity. And there's always interesting conversations to be had somewhere like DroneX, and this year I think there are even more interesting conversations than previous years.
And talking of the future then, how would you summarise the end game? What does the future of flight actually look like?
So I think the future of flight industry itself looks like better connected people, different commercial opportunities, and people being more and more innovative with how they can use technology to solve genuine problems that people have. That's what I think we're all aiming for ultimately in the end.
It's a nice outcome. Vicki, thank you so much. I know you've been talking a lot today, so thank you for taking the time to join us.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Some of the biggest players in the aviation industry are now taking part in the drone industry, and I'm joined by Dave Stepanek from Bristow. Dave, could you tell us a little bit more about what Bristow do?
Oh, happy to. First of all, we're delighted to be here at this DroneX and all the things that are happening in advanced air mobility. But Bristow, you may or may not know here, especially in the United Kingdom, where we've been a big brand name for quite some time, 75 years of operation. We primarily move people in the energy industry to offshore locations from around the world in 17 different countries and 6 continents. We also have a government services business where we are the primary search and rescue for several Coast Guards here in the United Kingdom, for His Majesty's Coast Guard. We're also in the Netherlands, the Dutch Caribbean, and soon to be Ireland. And for the MOD, we operate the search and rescue program in the Falkland Islands. So we have a wide variety of experience in the vertical lift space, and that's one of the reasons why we're excited to be here as part of this new revolution in aviation.
Wow, so you operate in some really testing conditions.
Indeed we do.
So how, I'm guessing that really requires quite powerful aircraft then today. How will some of the sort of future flight offerings, how are they going to measure up?
Well, I think they're going to have a difficult time at the very beginning on the harsh environment. So when you think about operating in very cold Arctic regions like we do in Norway and the north of Scotland, to some of the more tropical areas and desert regions that we do, for instance, in Rio de Janeiro in Nigeria, we're going to need to operate the initial advanced air mobility aircraft in more temperate climates as the energy sources improve, where we can put into environmental control systems or rotorized icing protection systems, and other things that are necessary to expand. So initially, find a nice temperate climate, and that's also key to any aircraft launch, whether it's a powerful S-92 or a smaller volocopter aircraft. Find a temperate climate, sort your supply chain to get the initial launch going so you can do it successfully.
So learn through flying.
Learn through flying. Pragmatic approach. Crawl, walk, run.
Fantastic. You mentioned there, some of the energy sources. I see from your sustainability report that you've started to use a blend of sustainable aviation fuel. Do you have a view to taking that to the next phase and starting to work with eVTOL manufacturers?
Absolutely. So with our hybrid electric suppliers like Electra.Aero and Elroy Air, who are going to use a small turbine engine that burns a little bit of fuel, we plan to use sustainable aviation fuel. And for our broader fleet and our airline, sustainable aviation fuel is the future. So we're buying as much as we can. It's the feedstock. We buy about 1 million liters a year, and we're supporting an aircraft operation in Scotland utilizing 10% blending. But as we can buy more, we'll add more to our system.
And over time, how much of your fleet do you think will fly on electric?
So we're going to continue to operate our traditional helicopters for a long time. We see the electric aviation or advanced air mobility aviation as a new market entry or in a parallel path. Using our core competencies from flying helicopters, these 75 years, and bringing that into actually markets that helicopters can't participate in. Sustainability, noise, cost are driving factors for helicopters that sometimes keep us out of certain markets, where advanced air mobility will allow us to move into those markets and provide a broader services to the world.
Uh-huh. You also spoke there about search and rescue, and in particular in the UK. I understand that there's a mixed fleet as well, so you're looking at using drones?
We are. So today we use drones in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Out of Lid, we are flying the Scheibel camcopter, doing surveillance around the channel. And part of our commitment to our customers, United Kingdom, Ireland, Netherlands, wherever else, is to continue to innovate over these long-term contracts. So it's not just staying with the technologies when the contract was let, but over time, as this advanced air mobility space grows and the technology advances, we believe it'll happen faster than traditional aviation. We see a place for it in our search and rescue programs, but we got to prove it first.
And then through flying.
That's right.
So, turning our attention to DroneX here today, what have you seen that's excited you?
Well, I've seen, one, it's just the energy.
Right.
Pardon the pun. The energy of this, clearly this is becoming a reality. I'm seeing more people. I've come to this conference for quite some time. I'm seeing more participation, seeing more grasp of this is actually going to happen. A lot of regulators are expanding the BV loss systems in their territories where they happen to operate. You're seeing some really interesting drone technologies here that are going to flow into the more advanced aircraft or transport category aircraft, and we see that vice versa going back as the advanced air mobility aircraft that are going to be carrying passengers and large payloads will flow back into it. So a lot of energy there, and there's a lot of municipal governments, regulators, departments for transportation here, learning, talking to the operators, talking to the people at the booth about what they can do to really help bring this to reality. And I think that's going to be key, because it's going to take a collaborative effort of government, customer bases, operators, infrastructure providers, air traffic management to make this happen.
That message about collaboration and working together has been something that's kind of ran through the thread of everybody that I've spoken to today. So yeah, really key point. Dave, a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you very much for your time.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
NATS are doing a great deal of work to support the future of flight, and I'm joined by their Safety Transformation Director, Andy Sage. Andy, I understand that this morning NATS gave a keynote speech here at DroneX. Could you tell us a little bit more about the speech?
Yeah, certainly. Two really underpinning themes for me and why we're here today. The first is allowing people to fly when they want and where they want. It's no good telling people to fly in segregated airspace away from the very business reason why they want to fly in the first place. And that means you've got to allow integration of new users alongside existing ones. Easy to say, I know, because to do so requires a brand new way of managing the airspace. And that's what we have to face up to. Secondly, the message that I've heard from everybody today is one of scalability. Everybody now gets it, they understand what's possible. Some people doing some really great work already, but people are now ready to make that next commitment. Speaking to people like the NHS today, only in the taxi on the way here today, finding out that they only want to do this if they can lift and shift the same solutions for every trust. If they have to go to the regulator with special solutions every time, it becomes far too difficult. And for those two reasons, that's why we think the market needs the next move on, and that's why we're here today.
So they're really compelling. What does NATS need to do in order to make this happen?
Well, here in the UK, we've got a very, very open market for airspace management. We are the largest, but only one of many service providers in the UK. We want to encourage more investment and innovation, but we need a more consistent, safe and assured foundation on which we can build those services. So, we've announced the introduction of something called NATS Open Air today that will provide that underlying digital infrastructure and network management that we need at a national level to solve some of the issues I've just described. And we really hope that that will help service providers and operators to come forward and invest with more confidence and move from some of these bespoke trials into a proper industry.
So today in the hall, we're surrounded by operators. There are lots of people who fly drones. What will this mean for them?
It is awesome being amongst, just walking around the corridors here and seeing the ideas and the purposes. I mean, it's really encouraging and engaging to see all this here today. It only motivates me more to be able to sort of jet power some of these industries and allow them to fly and serve those customers, because I can just see possibility after possibility, and it continues to excite me day after day.
One of the kind of key topics that's come up as we've been discussing things today is that of integration. So what does this mean for general aviation, for example?
I think we know that people can only learn through flight, but if every time they fly it requires more temporary airspace closures, we simply can't have a patchwork of temporary danger areas across the country. It's disrupted those existing users. So we fundamentally believe that we are following a difficult but the only realistic path by enabling general aviation to maintain their access to the skies alongside all those new users, rather than simply giving everyone their own space to fly within. Just not sustainable at all.
Cutting to NATS' mission, the bigger picture around advancing aviation and keeping the skies safe, how does that play out for drones?
Well, I'm going to steal a quote from somebody else here, if you don't mind, because at the Royal Aeronautical Society last week, John McKenna, who is CEO of CZI, one of the operators that we work with, I couldn't have said it better myself. He said the challenges were not one of technology, they weren't even regulation anymore. It was how we maintain the brilliant safety record that aviation has worked so hard to achieve over many decades, whilst at the same time scaling up this industry. In some ways, it's easy to keep the skies safe and it's easy to advance aviation, but to do the two together is the challenge. And that's what I think this entire room is relying upon NATS to do for it.
And talking of the entire room, obviously it's quite an impressive exhibition today, DroneX. What have you seen? What's been your key takeaway from the exhibition today?
It's not been so much the kits or the stands or the words, it's the energy you get from people in the room. There is a passion amongst people here that also means they can be frustrated when they can't move forward. But it's just the conversations with people and the sheer energy they're bringing to this industry that is just contagious, I have to say.
Andy, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For your
Good to see you.
time.
Thank you.
As with any form of transport, the drone industry requires insurance as well. And I'm here with Simon Ritterband from Moonrock Insurance to tell us a little bit more. Simon, founding a drone insurance company is quite an innovative move. What gave you that big idea?
Well, quite a curious way to get into the industry, actually. I didn't have any background in insurance or in drones, for that matter. I had a property company, and it was a call that I'd received from one of the builders asking to investigate something, I think it was roof tiles. I was wondering why he called me, and he was getting my permission to send a drone up into the sky. This was about, I'd say, 7 years or so ago, so I had no clue what he was talking about. So I went down to see what a drone was, and it flew in the air, took some pictures, came back down again, and I was like, well, there's something here. And I didn't know what it was, so I went away to become a drone pilot, just to get an idea of the market. And to cut a long story short, one of the prerequisites about becoming a qualified pilot was you needed insurance. So going online to find insurance for drones was actually very difficult. There was nothing available in the market. So I had the stupid idea of writing a business plan with a friend of mine, sending it off to a friendly insurer that we knew. And within about 48 hours, they came back and said, yeah, this is really interesting. Do you want to come in and discuss it? At which point I was like, okay, now we need to put some work in. So long story short, 6 months later, we were the first company to develop a drone-specific insurance policy. And we launched about a year later online with a click and bind drone insurance policy. And here we are today.
So Simon, if I am a drone pilot and I'm seeking to insure my flight, my drone, what are the key risks that Moonrock are providing insurance against?
A good question, and one we get regularly. I think so the key requirement that most commercial operators look for is public liability, to make sure it complies with CAA regulations. And then obviously we look to cover the drone, or the hull as it's called in insurance. But we've tried to offer the most comprehensive insurance and offer things including invasion of privacy, data protection, theft from the office or from the car. Sometimes might be different areas for chemical liability if you're looking at crop spraying. So we try and be as a wider insurance as possible, depending on the requirements of each individual.
In terms of your client base then, Simon, are we talking about the big commercial applications of drones?
Absolutely. So we cover everything from the small hobbyists flying a DJI Mavic all the way up through to trials of eVTOL and beyond visual line of sight. And that's where we've seen the biggest growth in the market, is in the large applications for commercial operations. So working with the likes of Skyports on drone deliveries, for instance, manor drones for, again, more drone deliveries, heavy lift goods drone applications. We're doing sky shows and swarm displays all over the world. We're looking at really exciting opportunities in the drone market. And we've got a real understanding and knowledge base from the past 6 or 7 years of trading to understand what the risks are, what the safety features are, the mitigating factors that we need to look at as well.
Simon, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.